How many of you have ever gone to a neighborhood that you knew as a child? It may have been the home that you grew up in, or it may have been a neighborhood that you passed through when you were growing up. It's always the best way home, the shortcut on your way home. Or it might have even been where a friend or family member lived and you visited them often. And you would go through the neighborhood and see this beautiful, plush neighborhood, green grass, kids playing, homes maintained properly, everything just looking great. And then you come back 10, 20 years later and you see something has changed about this neighborhood. There might be homes that you remember, Miss Sally Mae. She used to always be out there tending to her flowers. Or the family, like your best friend Tony's house, where you would go there and sit in the kitchen and eat some cake that his mom made, some pound cake that his mom made. And you remember that. You remember looking out the window and seeing your friends playing while you sat in your friend Tony's kitchen eating that pound cake. And now when you look at your friend Tony's house, you can't even recognize it because the windows are busted in or they are boarded up, and the yard is overgrown. We often see that. And I know for a long time I would see that. I'll be driving through and just like, oh, look at this neighborhood. They're not taking care of it. Or this neighborhood, you just kind of assume it's always been this way. But a lot of times it was not. And so the question is, what happened? What caused this change in this neighborhood, this once beautiful place that now you're afraid to be in after a certain time, and nobody is really like fighting to live there? What happened to that neighborhood? And my thought is that well, I won't, again, not my thought, but facts will show that a lot of times the problem is that the home was left to family and nobody actually went through the legal process to change the ownership from the original owner to the heirs of the original owner. And so just to kind of rephrase what I just said, you might have Miss Sally Mae's house, and Miss Sally Mae, she kept it up well, and she always made sure that the grass was cut and that the flowers were planted and that everything was beautiful with that house. And when Miss Sally Mae passed away, she left her house to her three children, not really intentionally. She didn't have a will, but just by default, when she died, her house went to her heirs. Her heirs happened to be her children. And now they have to go through a legal process in order to make sure that the ownership goes from Sally Mae to her heirs. This doesn't always happen, and I really wonder how often it does. Like, I've never seen a study or done any research, and perhaps one day that's something that I can figure out how to do. But how many families who have a loved one who dies actually go through the process of probating to make sure that the ownership of the house is transferred from the name of the original owner to their heirs? I would be curious to know how often this happens, because it's not something that everybody knows about. Like, you don't go to school and they say, all right, kids, when you grow up, you get you a house, you're going to have to make sure that you have a will, and you tell your kids when you pass, they got to probate your will. Like, nobody talks about that in school and everyday living. It's something that you just have to find out about. You have to hear about. And I used to wonder, like, how do people even know to go to a lawyer to get that resolved? Like, who told you to call my office because you have to probate the estate in order to change the ownership of the house from the deceased person to the heirs? Like, who tells you that? A lot of times the way people find out is because a problem has occurred. They might try to they know that the house was under a mortgage, and so they're trying to refinance the house. And they go to the lender and say, hey, I know that my mama has been paying her mortgage here for the past 15 years. And I want to make sure that she doesn't miss a payment, because she never missed a payment when she was living. And so I want to talk to you to see how I can get the mortgage in my name, get the notices sent to me, and make sure that the mortgage continues to be paid. And the lender's going to say, what's your name? Are you Miss Sally Mae? Okay, well, I can't talk to you. I can only talk to Miss Sally Mae. And ironically, Sally Mae is a lender's name. I wasn't even thinking about that. But anyway, I can only talk to Miss Sally Mae about this mortgage, so have a good day. And that's it. Like, most of the time it's just have a good day. Sometimes, and maybe it's happening more often than it used to, lenders will say, hey, you're going to have to talk to an attorney because we don't have records of you being an owner or someone who's an authorized representative for this house. So we're not going to be able to talk with you about this mortgage. And so in that case, you would know, okay, I need to go talk to a lawyer. But a lot of times they don't really tell you what you have to do. Or another situation might come up. You've been living in grandma's house for a long time. You were born, and pretty much the moment you came from the hospital up to this point, you've been living in this house. And your parents, you lived there with your parents, and then they've passed away, and now you are the person who's living in this house. It was your grandparents' house, and then your parents lived there. And for all you know, it's your house now, because for all your life, the house just went to the next person who was living, and you're just living there. Nobody knows that grandma has passed. The mortgage has already been paid. The utilities are, they were in her name, but they still come to the house. So you just send a check every month. Nobody's ever come cut anything off. So you've been fine. You've been living in the house. You pay the taxes every year because the notice comes to the house. And nobody's bothered you about this house. But one day the roof starts to leak. And you realize, I don't have $20,000 to repair this roof. So I need some help. I am going to either have to borrow some money from the bank, or I'm going to go to my local government and see if they have a program. But you go to those local entities and say, hey, I would like to apply for your home repair program or your home restoration program. And they say, are you Miss Sally Mae? Because that's the last person who owned this house. And it's like, no, I'm her granddaughter, and I've been living there, and I've been paying the utilities and doing everything for the past 15 years or 5 years or however long it's been. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm the owner. But you go to the county and they say, I'm sorry, we can't help you because turns out you're not the owner. Miss Sally Mae is the owner, and if she has passed away, it now belongs to her estate. And so then you might think, okay, I need a lawyer to help me because I got to get the property out of Miss Sally Mae's estate and put it in my name. And so you think, I'm going to just call my lawyer and she going to just write a deed and put it in my name. And then the lawyer says, we did a title search and we realized that this property is not just in your name, but you're not the only heir to this property. It's all of your grandma's kids, and if they pass away, then it's going to be their kids. So basically, you own this house with your aunts and uncles and your cousins. And if you have a family like either of mine, my mom has 8 brothers and sisters. My dad has 10 brothers and sisters. So either of those situations is kind of difficult because you're like, okay, so grandma had a house. She left the house to her 10 kids, and 2 of them have passed away. So now I got to deal with 8 aunts and uncles and then some cousins from the 2 that passed away. That's suddenly a complicated situation. But if probate had happened right after grandma passed, then it would have been in the hands of a fewer number of people. Even in my family, it's tough. You got 11 people or you got 9 people. It's hard to manage that kind of situation even. But usually you got, if there's a general family consensus, okay, we're going to get so-and-so to go to the courthouse and probate the estate because they always handle the business, and we're going to get them to probate, and then we're going to all just deed our interests over to them because we don't want it. We all have our own houses, and Bobo the only one who don't have his own house. So we're going to just deed our part to Bobo. But it's different when Bobo is, a cousin or even like a great nephew, where there are more people involved, and some of them may be close to you and some of them may not be close to you. And you're all owning this property together. It gets really complicated really fast. But the closer in time that you actually go through probate, the more likely that the process will be smoother. And so I just want to just tell everybody, as many people as I can, about how important it is to probate a person's estate after they pass away. And don't wait too long. Usually if there's a mortgage on the property, people will go ahead and probate because they don't want to lose a house in a foreclosure. But even if there is no mortgage, even if there's nothing stopping you from using this home the way that you want to use it, go ahead and probate that estate. because that's just going to make things a lot easier moving forward. So, just to explain what probate is, because I know I keep using that terminology. When someone dies, whether or not they have a will, their property is going to become part of their estate. And it's going to depend on what U.S. state they live in to determine what happens to the property right after the person dies. And so I think that's another thing I'm kind of missing. That here in Georgia, when someone dies, their property automatically goes to their heirs. But in other states, that may not be the case. It may not go to the heirs until probate happens. But here in Georgia, out in the atmosphere, when someone dies, the ownership of the house changes from the person who's died over to their heirs. But there's nothing that legally documents that. It just happens. The person dies, automatically their property changes over. And you have to have an administrator appointed or an executor, if there was a will, needs to be appointed so that person can then take control of the property. If they need to handle some business for the property in the meantime, they can do that. But then after that point, they can actually sign some deeds to change the name from the deceased person to their heirs, or if they had a will, it would go to their beneficiaries. And it's important that process happen. Otherwise, it's just, as time goes on, more and more people are going to just become owners of this property. And it just happens automatically. Someone dies, instantly their heirs become the owners. But there's nothing to show it happened. So if I just walk in and I'm like, who owns this house? I'm going to go to the courthouse. I'm going to look at the land records and do a search to see who owns the house. And the only thing I have is the name of the person on the deed. This person could have been gone 40 years, but I wouldn't know because I just have a deed that says this house went to Joe Schmo. And Joe Schmo could have been gone for 40 years, but I just know it was Joe Schmo. And so if I wanted to do something with the house, try to buy it, or if I was a person who Joe Schmo owed some money to, I might try to put a lien on the property or whatever it is that I'm trying to do. The only thing I have is that Joe Schmo is the owner. I don't realize that he's actually died and his children have died, and now it's in the hands of his grandchildren. And so that's one of the problems with how things happen automatically, is there's nothing to document that change in ownership has occurred. And so that's why probate is important, because it puts something in the legal records to show that the ownership has changed hands. So that is my quick and dirty why we need to probate conversation, and I definitely can talk more about it. I want to talk more about the difference between having a will and not having a will in the probate context, so we'll make sure to do that in the future. But I just want to make it clear that it's important that whether or not the person had a will, if they died and they owned any kind of property, whether that's real estate or even other property like stocks and bonds and bank accounts, sometimes you need to go through probate. It's a good practice to do that soon after the person has died to make sure that you can utilize that property. Because I would say, and I think that the statistics would support it, that not probating people's estates is a huge way that generational wealth is lost. You have it where someone dies and their assets just floats off into nothingness until somebody figures out a way to take ownership of it. We have here in Georgia, a little tidbit. Well, it's not just in Georgia. There's a website called unclaimed.org. And thank you so much, Badana. I'm glad you could join. But unclaimed.org is a website where you can search for property that was not claimed by either yourself or a loved one who's passed away. You can search to see if there's some money out there for you. That happens sometimes. So that's something that you might want to look at. I have not been fortunate enough to get that $5,000 or $10,000 that's waiting for me, but I know somebody who got like $10,000 that was unclaimed for herself. And so I look every now and then to see if there's something there for me, but there never is, because I guess I must be pretty good at claiming my money. But that might be something you want to look at. That's just like a little random tidbit. But what I want to do in closing is to say I would love to have you to schedule a consultation with me. I call them clarity calls because we want to help you get clarity on what your next step should be concerning your legal issues. So schedule a clarity call with us. Subscribe to the email newsletter. We're going to be sending out some good stuff, hopefully even this evening. I'm going to try to get around to that. So would love to have you join the community and become a subscriber to the email list. And there's going to be some good things coming up. So make sure you subscribe so that you know what's going on. And thank you so much for your attention. For those who are joining later, message me in the chat or DM me if you want to talk more. And thank you for tuning in. Live Badana, and then for a moment Mashida was in here. I appreciate your support, and share the link with a friend. Y'all have a great day, and I will be back next week.